9,000 missions in 30 days. That's the latest headline to come out of the Ukraine war, as Ukraine has done something so massive to Russia that it will go down in history. Russia is on its knees. Ukraine's ground-based drones have put it there. What Ukraine has now is an army of unalive weapons that are bleeding Russia to death and will be the key to victory over Putin's increasingly weakening forces. The robot surge is real. Putin is staring a real-life rise of the machines in the face. March has been a huge month for Ukraine on the ground robot front, as it's broken all past records for the use of this innovative technology in its war with Russia. The past month alone has seen Ukraine launch more than 9,000 missions using its ground robots, which demonstrates both that these robots are becoming a core part of the Ukrainian military and that they are succeeding at every task that is laid out for them. That success is a huge part of the reason why we're seeing record-breaking operation figures now. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense highlights that fact in a chart where it demonstrates just how much Ukraine's reliance on its ground robots, also known as unmanned ground vehicles or UGVs, has increased over just 5 months. In November 2025, those UGVs completed about 2,900 missions. That's an already impressive number that indicates the completion of almost 100 missions per day. But it was also just an early sign of the sheer tidal wave of UGVs that Ukraine was preparing to unleash in the war. By December, the number of ground robot missions completed in a month had come close to doubling, as Ukraine's UGVs handled over 5,200 assignments. More than 2,000 missions were added to the monthly UGV total in January, and though there was a lull, relatively speaking, in February, as the increase in UGV missions was only 400 for a total of over 7,900, March has seen Ukraine rocket up its UGV usage once again. 9,000 missions in 1 month. That's over 290 ground operations involving UGVs every day. What we're starting to see here is a pattern emerging. As Ukraine grapples with several challenges on the front lines, including a manpower issue that we're going to explore later, it has turned to the main thing that has kept it competitive in a war that it was supposed to lose years ago. Technology has so often been Ukraine's savior, and its expertise in drone and robotics tech is coming to the fore in a 2026 that now seems likely to be a turning point in the war. The robots are on the rise. Ukraine highlights that not only in the number of missions that UGVs are completing, but also in the number of units it has that are now actively deploying these robots. Euromaidan Press points this out in its report on Ukraine's latest achievement, as it notes that there has also been a sharp increase in the number of Ukrainian units using UGVs, to go along with the rise in UGV operations. Back in November 2025, just 67 of Ukraine's military units were using ground robots. Fast forward to today, and 167 of Ukraine's units are now using ground robots. Among them are the units that the Ministry of Defense has highlighted as top performers. The 1st Separate Medical Battalion is making heavy use of UGVs when we dig into the startling evolution of Ukraine's ground robots. However, UGVs are also finding use in Ukraine's assault units, as the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade and the 92nd Separate Assault Brigade are also standouts that have been name-checked by Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. Ukraine adds that the 3rd Operational Brigade and the 95th Separate Air Assault Policia Brigade have also made excellent use of UGVs. This is a large spread of units, each of which serves different purposes, and it shows us that there has been a distinct shift in ground drone technology that has made UGVs some of the most versatile assets that Ukraine has in its arsenal. Ground robots aren't some brand new type of technology that have only just arrived on the scene in Ukraine. As is so often the case, what seems to be an overnight success story is actually the result of years of work that have contributed to the evolution of a technology that is now starting to showcase its true potential. Early ground robots, as used in Ukraine, were fairly primitive compared to what we're starting to see on the battlefield today. That's not to say that they weren't useful. Back in November 2025, which is uncoincidentally the starting point for the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense's figures, UGVs were being used all over the front lines as supply vehicles, with Russian unmanned aerial vehicles making it incredibly difficult for Ukrainian troops and traditional vehicles to transport supplies without being targeted. Small UGVs that are easy to camouflage and difficult to spot were starting to make a name for themselves. They could carry food and ammunition from the rear to the front lines, as they have been doing in embattled regions like Pokrovsk, where such supplies often mean the difference between life and death. At the time, the BBC said the Battle of Pokrovsk would likely go down as the first in history to involve the mass use of UGVs, both for logistical support and as a tool that Ukraine could use to evacuate wounded soldiers. In fact, around 90% of all supplies being delivered to the frontline forces in Pokrovsk were arriving courtesy of ground robots by November, the BBC said. One of the UGVs the outlet highlighted in its article was called the Termit, and it has a capacity of about 200 kilograms or 440 pounds. Offloaded from a van, it can be remotely controlled to its destination by an operator stationed several miles away. That process highlights what makes UGVs so invaluable to Ukraine. They reduce risk, but they can also do much more than that. We mentioned evacuations a moment ago. The Battle of Pokrovsk may well have served as a blueprint for the use of UGVs to cart injured soldiers away from hot zones elsewhere in Ukraine today. On April 7th, United 24 media reported that Ukraine had managed to pull off 6 evacuations using its ground robots in just 24 hours. Those robots aren't complicated, at least in terms of their looks and functionalities. They look like little more than stretchers on wheels, often with bars that allow for an injured soldier to be loaded onto them. What they can do is cover large distances far faster than a person attempting to carry a wounded soldier away from the battle. In the 24-hour operation upon which United 24 media reported, 2 of Ukraine's UGVs combined to cover a distance of roughly 300 kilometers, or about 186 miles. Find a human who can cover that sort of distance in 24 hours and you've found the sort of soldier that simply doesn't exist. There are now 6 Ukrainian soldiers who are alive due to UGVs. There are also Russian soldiers who are dead because of Ukraine's ground robot technology. As that tech has evolved, Ukraine has been moving beyond using UGVs for logistics and evacuation. The once benign vehicles are being turned into lethal attacking forces. And it's in this type of usage that things get really serious for Russia. But before we dig into that, you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the perfect time to do so to ensure that you never miss one of our videos. 2026 has seen Ukraine embark on a massive campaign to deploy armed UGVs, and these killer robots are making their presence felt in far more tangible and devastating way to Russia's forces than the robots that Ukraine uses for logistics and evacuation. Ukraine's combination of innovation and being able to use whatever it has on hand to create death-dealing weapons has come to the fore here. The BBC reports that Ukraine's K2 brigade, which it says is the first to have a dedicated UGV battalion, has taken to mounting Kalashnikov machine guns on its ground robots. As Alexander Afansayev, who leads the K2 Brigade's UGV battalion, notes, they open fire on a battlefield where an infantryman would be afraid to turn up, but a UGV is happy to risk its existence. Imagine what that must mean for the small units of Russian soldiers that Putin has been sending to infiltrate Ukraine's territory. Those units might be expecting drones in the skies or soldiers on the ground, but then they come face to face with what looks like a tiny tank that has a machine gun mounted on top. Surrender is the only option, and it has to be done fast because that UGV can spray bullets and then move on without giving a thought to what it's doing. It doesn't need to think. It has no concept of death, and it can be replaced with another machine if Russia's soldiers somehow manage to counteract it. It's not just UGVs roaming around with machine guns that Putin's patsies have to worry about. Ground robots can also carry bombs. Ukraine has been coming up with some terrifically powerful ways to use that sort of functionality. After all, remember what we've already told you about UGVs. They're often small enough to move undetected. UGVs can also be parked away in cover, often for hours at a time, preserving their batteries as they wait to ambush unknowing Russian forces that are unfortunate enough to choose their location as the place to hole up. And with hundreds of pounds of carrying capacity, a UGV is more than capable of delivering the sort of firepower that can ruin a Russian's life in a heartbeat. We saw that in January when footage emerged of a UGV mission carried out by Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps. That video highlighted a UGV operator using a control pad that looks like it was pulled straight from a video game console to steer a small UGV into a collapsed building, carefully navigating the rubble, which also highlights how UGVs have developed to traverse tough terrain. The robot enters a small opening where Russian soldiers are attempting to hide away. Boom. A huge explosion takes out the encamped Russians. It later emerged that Ukraine's UGV had traveled about 20 kilometers, or around 12.4 miles, to reach its target, and that it was carrying 12 landmines. Again, this is Ukraine using what it has to hurt Russia, and it did just that to devastating effect when taking out Russia's soldiers. A remote-controlled UGV carrying mines that can be detonated from a distance is a huge threat to infiltration units that have been tasked with staying out of sight. Those hidden units can't see what's coming for them. By the time a UGV arrives, it's too late for them to do anything about it. And there's more. Russia is already having to deal with UGVs that are sustaining Ukraine's ground forces and directly attacking Putin's soldiers. What Russia never expected was that it would have to worry about UGVs also becoming an important tool that Ukraine can use to minimize the damage that Russia is trying to inflict on Ukraine's cities with its aerial bombardments. On April 4th, the Kyiv Independent revealed that Ukrainian soldiers had used a special firefighting UGV for the first time while dealing with a fire in the Donetsk-based city of Kramatorsk. Currently one of the targets in Russia's spring offensive, that city has been struck by a Russian attack that caused a fire in a residential district. That fire was spreading toward gas canisters. Sending soldiers or human firefighters in to deal with it was a massive risk. So Ukraine chose option B. It sent in a UGV that was able to douse the fire enough to stop it from spreading. The soldiers operating the UGV were able to stay at a safe distance, which both eliminated the risk posed by the gas canisters and minimized the risk of a repeat of the Russian shelling that caused the problem in the first place. Again, it's the sort of creativity that has allowed Ukraine to survive for as long as it has against Russia's seemingly endless supply of manpower. And all of this talk about minimizing risk brings us nicely to what Ukraine's UGVs, and the fact that it is using them in more operations than ever before, really mean. As important as the sorts of incidents that we've highlighted so far most certainly are, it's the benefits that lie behind what we see that are vital to Ukraine. A key among those benefits is one that Ukraine desperately needs. UGVs go a long way towards solving Ukraine's manpower problem. After more than 4 years of war, Ukraine faces plenty of challenges when it comes to getting much-needed manpower onto the front lines. According to a March piece by the Carnegie Endowment, those challenges include severe shortages in some areas of the front lines, record rates of absence within the military, and a dwindling number of volunteer recruits. Combine all of that with fatigue among the existing soldiers who are locked into a constant battle for survival, where they eliminate scores of Russian soldiers only to see more take their place, and you get the early signs of a crisis. DW points out that Ukraine isn't devoid of manpower. Around 30 to 35,000 people are called up for military service in the country every month. However, many of these would-be soldiers are attending Ukraine's military training against their will, and that is leading to the high number of desertions that Ukraine is experiencing, the outlet says. Ukraine is trying to counteract these manpower issues. It's extended the length of its military training from 30 to 51 days to ensure that recruits are better prepared for what life is like on the front lines. Forbes adds that some in Ukraine's military high command are also arguing that Ukraine needs to do a better job of placing the troops that it mobilizes. Morale, though it will always be a challenge, becomes less of a problem when troops don't feel as though they've only been assigned to places where Ukraine needs quick fixes, argued former Chief of Staff of the Azov Brigade, Bohdan Krotevich. His point, and one that Ukraine seems to be trying to address, is that recruits need to know more and feel useful in the war, or else they start to feel like little more than warm bodies. Compounding all of this is the manpower advantage that Russia already has. With a population that is roughly 4 times the size of Ukraine's, Russia can absorb losses that now total more than 1.3 million. Ukraine does not have that capacity, nor does it want to lose troops at such a massive scale. The rise of UGVs is the key to everything that Ukraine does on the ground as its war with Russia moves into 2026 and beyond. According to the Modern War Institute at West Point, Ukraine's increasing use of UGVs has already reduced personnel casualties by up to 30%, as claimed by Ukraine's general staff. That alone is a major benefit of ground robots. Fewer casualties means that Ukraine doesn't have to worry so much about replacing killed and wounded soldiers. That in turn gives Ukraine some breathing room to confront the assignment and training challenges we've mentioned, as we're seeing in how Ukraine now provides 21 more days training to its recruits. For Ukraine, UGVs are as much about slowing its own rate of personnel attrition as they are about enhancing the rate of attrition being experienced by Putin's forces. After all, ground robots are now proving that they can be an attacking force, but it's Ukraine's unmanned aerial vehicles that are still tearing through Russian soldiers and equipment faster than anything else that Ukraine has in its arsenal. Those aerial drones are replacing Ukrainian soldiers in the vast kill zones that Ukraine has created. UGVs are replacing them on the logistics and medical evacuation fronts. According to United 24 Media, some in Ukraine's military believe that UGVs could also be the key to replacing the soldiers that Ukraine doesn't have through recruitment. In other words, they replace as much as they save. Andriy Beletsky, who commands Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps, which you may remember from the story of the UGV that delivered mines to Russian infiltrators, suggests that Ukraine is on the cusp of a revolution. UGVs could outright replace a third of the soldiers that Ukraine currently has committed to ground operations. If that prediction comes true, it's huge for Ukraine. The manpower burden that Ukraine faces would be reduced enormously. Soldiers on the front lines would also be able to rotate in and out with more frequency, which adds up to more well-rested soldiers, supported by robots and drones who are fighting against Russia's increasingly ragged forces. With all of these benefits in mind, is it any wonder that Ukraine is committing to building as many UGVs as possible? Ukraine now has 280 companies that are committed to building UGVs, the Lowy Institute reports. It noted in a March 30th piece that Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade had used UGVs to transport so many goods that it would have needed 10,000 soldiers each capable of carrying 20 kilograms, or around 44 pounds, of equipment to match them. That's a difference maker so massive for Ukraine that investment into UGVs is a necessity rather than a nice-to-have. Ukraine now plans to produce over 20,000 UGVs in 2026 alone, the Jamestown Foundation adds. If each of these robots can carry 100 kilograms of equipment, and that's an estimate that is on the very low end of the scale, that will be equivalent to recruiting 50,000 soldiers. Robots can get more done in a logistical sense than human soldiers. That sort of efficiency is priceless for Ukraine as it adapts to Russia's latest attempts to bombard its defenses with cannon fodder in the 2026 spring and summer offensive. Russia understands the risk that UGVs pose to its attritional strategy. It's trying to take Ukraine's UGVs out of the equation to force the use of manpower that Ukraine doesn't want to spare. An April 6th report published by Liga.net notes that Russia has created entire units that have the sole purpose of hunting down Ukraine's UGVs. Those units are extensions of those that Russia has already created to target Ukraine's logistical pipelines, but they now face a robot enemy that is harder to spot and capable of doing things that soldiers can't. Clearly, Russia's attempts to stop Ukraine aren't working. UGVs carrying out 9,000 missions in a month is evidence of that. But what Putin and his forces aren't ready for is the fact that what we're seeing in Ukraine is just the starting point. More UGVs are coming. Thousands more. And if Ukraine can transition to using a large robot army quickly enough, the manpower advantage that Russia has enjoyed for over 4 years becomes moot. In a battle between meat and machines, the meat loses. UGVs may just be the key to Ukraine's entire strategy of bleeding Russia to death. What we see here is yet another example of how Ukraine's innovative approach to warfare has put Russia on the back foot. That innovation hasn't gone unnoticed. The chaos caused by Operation Epic Fury is leading to Gulf states calling on Ukraine to share its knowledge and expertise. Those calls are being answered by Ukraine, and that could have massive implications for Russia's invasion. Find out more in our video, and if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to see more analysis of how Ukraine is changing the face of modern war. And thank you, as always, for watching.